you've got to not only kind of preserve it till the end, but you've got to get rid of those tools that Davide has access to, in particular that single strike Urshifu that has the focus sash. It's got that double layer of that security blanket in the focus sash, so you have to kind of hit into it twice to knock it out before that Goldingo is kind of freed up to be able to do what Eduardo would like it to do.
Oh, but here we go. Get ready. The first top 8 match of the Liverpool Pokemon Regional Championships has just begun. Game 1, we have Registeel and that Raging Bolt versus Eduardo's Incineroar and the Urshifu Single Strike. So it's what we were just talking about, Lee. We've got the fake out pressure immediately on the field, accompanied by that Urshifu, which will be able to not only super effectively threaten this Registeel with the fighting type move, it will also be able to bypass it through that critical hit of the Wicked Blow.
Yeah, that is a really big, important piece of information to get out to everyone at home. Protecting the Urshifu is really important, and we are going to see it protected here as that Thunderbolt goes into it, because the Wicked Blow can surpass any iron defenses that do come out potentially from that Registeel.
As we're going to see the parting shot being a really good choice right here. Not actually opting to go for the fake out here, anticipating Davide to go a bit on the defensive side with the Registeel and just wanting to further mitigate the damage output of this Raging Bolt. Bring that Golden Go straight in. Oh, and very well, nice protected there. I thought the body press was going into the Golden Go for a moment, but it was the double focus onto the Urshifu. So Davide correctly identifying Urshifu is going to be a big problem for his team.
Yeah, definitely identifying that, going after it. So very smart protect here from Eduardo to avoid any damage here and allowing him to get that parting shot, take the special attack down on that Raging Bolt by 1 stage, allowing the Goldingo onto the field, and now in a position where it can start setting up with those nasty plots.
As we do actually have the Raging Bolt coming in right here, wanting to safeguard this Urshifu for the mid-game. Snarl actually coming out and dropping the special attack of both the Golden Go and Raging Bolt. Really nice move selection there with combination of body press. So not wanting to get the iron defenses set up just yet, wanting to make sure the Urshifu is got rid of, or at least the slot that's been brought in for it defensively has had a bit of its HP chipped away.
Yeah, and the nice thing here about that Snarl is it is slowing the Goldingo down, but it's not quite keeping up with those nasty plots, where we're going to see Eduardo go for another nasty plot here, which is then going to put it on to +3. Essentially, if another Snarl comes out from this Raging Bolt, it feels forced into going for that. You're going to only take it down to -2, so the Goldingo over 2 turns essentially getting 1 nasty plot ready to fire off next turn. And a big Draco Meteor coming out.
Big Draco Meteor being able to go ahead and get the 2-hit KO, but because of the Assault Vest, not quite enough. Just going to show that additional bolt that utility item is able to bring. And another Snarl has been dispatched right now. Golden Go brought back down to +1 of its special attack.
+2 because the Snarl has kept it in check, so it is +2 at the moment. I think here the switch from Davide is really nice with that Urshifu, because you're almost pinning Eduardo into the situation where if you're wanting to keep that Goldingo on the field and take advantage of those nasty plots, you're almost forced to go for the terrestrialization here, because you want to avoid any of those big threatening attacks from the Urshifu, the wicked blows, the close combats. With that fairy terrestrialization, you can kind of mitigate those threats slightly and get a big attack off. As well as that, you kind of give yourself the immunity to any dragon type attacks that are coming out from the Raging Bolt as well, and you're not taking super effective damage from the Snarls, which inevitably probably will come out this turn. But can the Goldingo get an attack off here? We are seeing Eduardo change its board state.
Ooh, Incineroar being brought in here. You want to have Fake Out available the next turn, accompanied by that Intimidate if there's going to be any fighting type of focus from Davide's Urshifu. However, we've got to switch up over on the other side of the field. Registeel wanting to be brought in right now. It's going to be actually doing a good job in resisting any Make It Rains that do want to actually be opted right here, in combination with the Fairy Terrestrialization on Goldengo's side.
Yeah, and like we pointed out, I think Eduardo wants to avoid any big damage from that potential Urshifu that's coming out, and the close combat now into that slot, but into the Incineroar, doing some considerable damage there, but showing how good that Intimidate was onto the Urshifu, reducing that damage, and then in line
Mm-hmm.
Activating that citrus berry to give some health back to that Incineroar.
But it is going to be dropping its defenses, meaning the Focus Sash will be proc from this Make It Rain, and Registeel just sort of absorbing that bit of damage and just going to get a bit of recovery at the end of the turn due to the leftovers as well. And because of the speed interactions of the leftover proc on the Goldengo side, it is a bit of an indication it is trained to be faster than the Registeel.
There is a bit of a problem with going for that Terastallization into the Fairy type because you lose your immunity to Body Press, although it is not going to be super effective. You look at the other option that the Registeel has access to on Davide's side of the field, it is Heavy Slam, and that is going to hit for super effective damage.
As we're going to see the fake out focus into the Registeel. Close combat picks up the KO onto the Incineroar, and all of a sudden we've got Eduardo one Pokemon down at the moment. And I think in this scenario, like you correctly pointed out there, Lee, we do have a Nuzlocke once again being opted to be set up. But the Fairy Terra allows it to not only be susceptible to Body Press, it also allows it to be susceptible to Heavy Slam.
Yeah, and that is a problem. And I think now that you've lost your Incineroar, you lose a way to kind of mitigate the damage from that Heavy Slam, because normally Heavy Slam is one of those moves which is it comes off your attacking stats, so you can reduce that down, the damage, with Intimidate. But losing your Incineroar does put you at a bit of a detriment to be able to do that. But you do still have your own Urshifu. Eduardo bringing that onto the field now, it really makes it hard for Davide to click in with that Iron Defense because of the threat of the Wicked Blow. Now combine that alongside the Goldengo that is sitting powered up now after that last nasty plot. It is going to be in a position to do some big damage into both things on Davide's side of the field.
And I think right now, if you're Eduardo, you do need to take into consideration whether you're going to allow the Urshifu to be targeted down here, or perhaps opt in with a switch of the Raging Bolt. But no, over on Davide's side, actually going to be, like you mentioned, wanting to opt it out, switch it for the Cresselia, which will be coming out, of course, in this game. Close combat, focusing down on the Urshifu, bringing it down to its Focus Sash, but we know it will remain on the field at least for this turn. The real question right now is it just going to be another Make It Rain to try to get even more damage capitalized off of this? Because sure, Close Combat didn't deal as much damage, but it's really valuable chip damage.
Big Shadow Ball, though, coming out into the Cresselia and picking up a huge knockout, taking another Pokemon down on Davide's side of the field, and Eduardo paving the way here to a victory, but not over quite yet. Davide still got that Urshifu and the Registeel in the back.
And I think we know what this Pokemon is capable of. It's more so being able to position yourself quite nicely and not have that direct threat from the Urshifu. So Davide doing a really good job in bringing it down to its Focus Sash, but now you just need to try to focus down on getting rid of it, and then that opens up the Registeel as well as a bit of a combination with that Raging Bolt in order to resist any sort of Make It Rains that come out from Eduardo's Goldengo.
Yeah, it was a nice play previously for Davide. He does sacrifice the Cresselia, but he does reset that Intimidate drop onto the Registeel, so you can bring it back in onto the field now and pressure with those full power Heavy Slams into that Goldengo slot. Question is, has it got enough capabilities to be able to take these boosted attacks, these Shadow Balls in particular? Because that is the big question.
Oh, but the Sucker Punch comes out. It may have been a speed tie in that situation, so it's more so the battle of who wins that. If they tried to opt for the Sucker Punch there between the Urshifus, Shadow Ball focuses down the Registeel, doesn't quite pick up the KO, but it deals a lot of damage and is retaliated with a Heavy Slam. That is a guaranteed 2-hit KO from that range, leaving Davide on his final 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, and I think the big thing here for Eduardo is he's still got that Urshifu here, showing how important that Focus Sash is to be able to not only stick around but take a bigger hit and still have a big impact in this game, because the Sucker Punch is still active here. Can go after something like the Raging Bolt, probably will be faster than it, so we'll get the jump if it tries to go for maybe that Thunderclap, take it down before it is able to have any impact onto the Goldengo. Then you can go for that Shadow Ball and close this game up onto the Registeel. We know if it gets another Shadow Ball into that slot, it will be able to take it down. So everything pressured from Davide's side of the field from Eduardo's.
Yeah, and there are a couple of mind games to take into consideration when it always comes down to either Sucker Punches or Thunderclaps that are present on the field. Which Pokemon is going to move first? first and be able to get that attack off. And then the other scenario is any sort of baits that may come into consideration. But because that Raging Bolt is the Assault Vest, it doesn't have the option of going for any sort of status type moves. It will always be susceptible to Sucker Punches, but no, we actually see the Thunderclap coming first, actually being able to pick up the KO on the Urshifu and opening this Shadow Ball up to actually pick up the KO because of those nasty plots coming in to the fore. But if I'm not mistaken, Lee, this is going to be a heavy slam KO.
It is going to take down the Goldingo, and it's going to take it down to one Pokemon versus one on each side of the field. Yeah, very close end to this game. Eduardo is going to be left with that Raging Bolt against Davide's Registeel that's still sticking around on his side of the field.
And this is going to cause even more mind games. It's, yes, going to be dependent on how both of these Pokemon have been trained in their speeds, but also the interaction of the leftovers recovery that you're able to do the 1-2 protects, as we're seeing Davide opt to go in for, in order to ensure you have a bit more gradual health restored at the end of each turn.
Yeah, and I think that the leftovers here could be the key to Davide kind of winning this. We're going to be interesting to see what that Thunderbolt damage is looking like from the Raging Bolt from Eduardo's side. Has it got enough to be able to take it down? You would imagine it probably has, but it will be interesting to see here as the Thunderbolt comes out, and it is... Oh, so close!
Oh, it survives and does get the paralysis off as well, leaving this scenario susceptible to future paralysis, but I think it still likely would not have mattered. The amount of damage that Registeel did incur would mean that Davide would probably have to get like a triple or quadruple protect in order to bring its HP back up to survive another one.
Yeah, and you're going to put yourself in that continuous loop where you're going to have to get that every time to get another attack off. And you saw how much the body press did there. It just wasn't enough. You're going to need another 2 to 3 body presses to be able to remove this Raging Bolt. You just don't have the room to do that. The Raging Bolt's so powerful with that Thunderbolt. The paralysis is unfortunate, of course, but it looks like Eduardo going to be able to close this one out. But Davide not giving up, taking every chance to go for his out here and take full advantage of this leftover recovery, getting a double protect there.
Yeah, definitely not giving up. There's no reason not to. You may also be biding a bit of time in order to reevaluate your game to adaptation. So I do really like how Eduardo was able to go ahead and pave this game out with that end game of the Raging Bolt, but we get the full paralysis. No more protect for you, Registeel. Back into your ball you go, and game 2 is on the 4.
What an incredible first game, coming right down to the wire there. It was so close all the way until that last few turns. And the Raging Bolt, Eduardo preserving it perfectly in the end game, probably knowing that I can bring it in, I can remove the opposing Raging Bolt, because that does threaten my Raging Bolt in the back. So prioritizing that with the Goldingo, knowing that the Assault Vest is on there, knowing that there's no potential protect, taking the safer option, targeting into that slot. It also gives you a bit more protection with your Raging Bolt when you do bring it in, and knowing your damage calculations that the Registeel was so low at that point anyway, it isn't in a position to kind of recover itself out, even with multiple protects.
And I feel like there could have been more reliance, more of a role that could have been fulfilled from that Cresselia that unfortunately did go down as soon as we saw it, and it was sort of treated like a damage sponge in that scenario, and that may be inclining a bit to what defensive switches Davide has available to himself. But having a Lunar Blessing set up next to a Registeel can further allow sustainability from Registeel, which can really push it through.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good shout there, because I think the one problem with the Registeel was just taking too much damage at the end of that battle, and the Cresselia hadn't had any mileage out from Davide. If you can protect the Cresselia a little bit better and maneuver yourself into a board position in the late game where you've got the Registeel out next to the Cresselia, it almost gives you the room to be able to get the Iron Defense off, increase the damage of that body press, and then utilize that Lunar Blessing with the Cresselia. I think it's going to be a difficult one, because you almost need to bait in the Goldingo to going for that Fairy Terrestrialization again, and that's something that's probably on Davide's mind as he goes into this game too.
Yeah, exactly, as we're going to see the same Pokemon coming out from Davide's side as well as Eduardo. I think this is probably the most optimal lead that both of these trainers have considered when reviewing the matchup and flowchart that they could go about this. We saw previously in game 1 the Incineroar Incineroar actually opting to go for that parting shot, which is contrary to this first game 2 turn, where we saw the fake out going into the Raging Bolt, and Registeel nearly picked off there with that close combat. It will likely be trying to get that Urshifu's Focus Sash poker, but no! It tried to go for the Iron Defense instead, not going on the offensive, perhaps not anticipating that focus down into the slot.
This puts it in a really precarious position, because now, even after the Iron Defense, it's in a position where Wicked Blow is going to pick up the knockout. Obviously, boosting that defense by 2 stages is great, but when you're coming up against a Wicked Blow, the critical hit's always going to ignore those boosts, always going to do maximum damage, and really in a position where it can't protect, you've got to switch it out if you want to preserve it for later. So putting Davide instantly in a bad position. Even the Raging Bolt isn't in a spot where it's going to be able to protect the Registeel this turn, because of that Focus Sash still intact on that Urshifu. So in a great position, and the Incineroar now freed up to go for a parting shot into the Raging Bolt, potentially lower that special attack down even further, reposition himself, and put him in a really dominating position going forward in this game 2.
Such a great move that on the surface level looks to be simple, but trust me, ladies, gents, and all folks, it is not, as we've got the KO onto the Registeel. It is out of the count for game 2. Thunderbolt focuses down on the Urshifu, brings it down to its Focus Sash, allowing this Incineroar to get that pivot action going. Basically, what Incineroar does all the time is being great utility, having the fake out, having the intimidate, but more importantly, having that pivot action going. Most of the times being the slower pivot on the field in order to bring a new Pokemon from the back in safely.
Yeah, the Urshifu on Eduardo's side does have to be careful because of the Thunderclap attack from the Raging Bolt, but the big thing is that the Raging Bolt special attack is now sitting at -1, so it's not going to be hitting as hard as it previously would have done, making it a little bit easier for Eduardo's Raging Bolt to come onto the field and be the big pressure here alongside that Urshifu. Now, if you are Eduardo, you've got the option where you could maybe even switch out the Urshifu, preserve it for later, bring the Incineroar back onto the field. It's going to comfortably be able to take an electric type attack now, and then it provides a bit of fake out support going forward. But you have to deal with this Cresselia. It is something that you're going to have to think about, because it is going to be a difficult Pokemon to take down.
Yeah, it really will be, and I think Davide may need to try to hone in on this Raging Bolt being a main sort of channel for dispatching of Eduardo's Pokemon right now, to allow that Urshifu in the back to come in healthily and try to get those burst damage KOs that it can pick up on any sort of Pokemon that have been wearied down. But no, we have the Incineroar now coming back onto the field.
Yeah, and it is going to provide that fake out support this next turn, in particular for its own Raging Bolt. And we are going to see the Terastallization come out, and it is going to be this Eduardo side of the field going for that Fairy Terastallization on the Raging Bolt. And they're going to give it protection against those Dragon-type attacks that could potentially come out and be quite threatening to it otherwise.
Oh, the Thunderclap does fail, trying to hone in onto that Urshifu, but we've got the Fairy Terra Blast coming out from Eduardo's Raging Bolt in really good fashion, dealing a 2-hit KO, once again evidencing why this Assault Fest is such a great option on the Raging Bolt. And there's a Moonblast special attack drop that actually pins back a couple of the additional damage output potential that this Raging Bolt has over on Eduardo's side.
Yeah, the Moonblast coming out from the Cresselia there, trying to fish for some super effective damage of its own, but the Terastallization going to the Fairy type with Eduardo's Raging Bolt takes away that weakness and immunity to the Dragon type on the opposing Raging Bolt as well. Davide not getting really much mileage there, clicking in with the Thunderclap, trying to catch that Urshifu that was out in the field, but smartly Eduardo switching it out for the Incineroar, now in a position to cycle that parting shot once again, readjust his board position and weaken the opposing Pokemon on Davide's side of the field once again.
Once again, indeed, we're going to be seeing the Terastallization, but on the other side of the field with the other Raging Bolt, still opting for, of course, the Fairy Terra. And in this scenario, I think being able to have the Lunar Blessing support on the side is really what you're looking forward to here. You want to avoid any super effective damage dealt onto that slot, but no, Eduardo's actually going to be focusing down on the Cresselia, wanting to get some damage dealt, which is going to be instantly recovered. And actually, something to note, the speed interactions there, Cresselia being faster not only than Raging Bolt over on Davide's side, as well as the Incineroar. Snarl goes ahead and further further mitigates that damage output of the Raging Bolt over on Eduardo's side. But Assault Vest is no more.
That is a really smart knockoff there, removing one of the big tools that Raging Bolt has access to on Davide's side of the field, making it more susceptible to those special attacks coming out from Eduardo's side of the field.
Oh, but Thunderbolt, of course, hitting neutral right now because of the Fairy Terror, but Lunar Blessing being able to outspeed and get that recovery dealt is quite nice. Something to take into consideration, but whoa, talk about something to take into consideration. Full paralysis on the Raging Bolt over on Eduardo's side, which means that it is no longer going to be the fastest thing on the field.
No, it will not, and it'll be more susceptible to those snarls that can be fired out from Davide's Raging Bolt, which are going to be so useful in allowing things to be able to take attacks, especially after losing the Assault Vest, losing that special defense boost that it had access to. But now the Gold Ingo hits the field. It is going to be in a position to boost up, potentially get some super effective damage onto that Cresselia, but it doesn't have the option now going forward in this Master Terrestrialize. So we'll be taking super effective damage from the Snarls, although not too much damage, but you've still got to watch because they can start to stack up over time.
And this is sort of the scenario that Eduardo has been trying to pave for himself. He wants to be able to have that Golden Go once the Fairy Terrestrialization has come out from Davide's side. It's now going to be susceptible to it, even though the Lunar Blessing is on the field. You want to make sure you're picking up those KOs. You're forcing Davide to no longer have any sort of switch outs as we see the Urshifu now being brought in.
Yeah, and this is an awkward position because you don't really want to be bringing the Urshifu in to take an attack to have its sash broken, but sometimes it is what you have to do. It is a huge make and rain, and it takes down the Raging Bolt.
Yeah, it takes it straight down, and all of a sudden, it's what we're just talking about. Davide has been brought down to his final 2 Pokemon. No more venues for switching Pokemon out, but Thunderbolt will be picking up the KO. That 2 has just become a lonesome one, being that Cresselia, which at this point is just right. It's basically the writing on the wall.
It is a bit, because the Gold Ingo is not really going to be too worried about the Moonblast, the only option that Cresselia has offensively. Again, the Raging Bolt with the Assault Vest as well, not really worrying about that, as we see a nasty plot come out from Eduardo's Gold Ingo.
Yeah, at this point, you just want to make sure you just pick up the KO where you need to. Cresselia is very bulky. Raging Bolt, however, is fully paralyzed, and not something that I was expecting to say today. But regardless, I think Eduardo has been able to really navigate this to a very high level in order to go ahead and clinch his position straight into the top 4 of the 2024 Pokemon Regional Championships at Liverpool.